Hello and welcome to our Facebook Live career chat, where we'll be discussing how to navigate networking. My name is Anna Velleggia. I am the Manager of Career Services for the NC State Alumni Association, and I could not have thought of a better person to do this event with than Ashton Smith. So a little bit more about our resident expert. Ashton is the Community and Employee Engagement Manager for the Citrix Raleigh office. She handles community relationships and partnerships in the Raleigh and Greater Triangle community. Outside of work, she stays active in the community by serving with a number of local organizations, including the Dix Park Master Plan Advisory Committee, DHIC, an affordable housing nonprofit, and the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. She's raised in Raleigh and is a graduate of NC State's College of Design. She spent some time in real estate locally, and then she went and taught English in an Italian island before settling back into Raleigh, which is really cool. And you can follow her on the internet at Ashton May. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. So one thing I do want to say, though, is as we go through, we will be taking questions live. So we have a couple to get started with, but if you have some as we go, please feel free to send those in, and I will definitely get to them as they come through.
I think there's a prize for question askers, too.
Yes, actually. Once you ask a question, you'll be entered into a raffle, and you can win a really nice portfolio that's NC State branded, which is really cool. So thank you for reminding me. All right, so we're just going to get started. Ashton, one thing that I hear a lot about is this kind of negative perception of the word networking and kind of what it means. So just to get us started, how would you define networking?
Yeah, definitely. I think more and more modernly, we're hearing people move away from networking as a word. And part of that is because it has a really cold connotation. Mm-hmm. It feels like you're using people for something. And more the focus is shifting to relationship development. And really, how do you build friendships and cultivate meaningful relationships with people that are two-way streets instead of you making single contacts for someone, going to a meeting, shaking hands, exchanging business cards. It really has become much more about building a network and building relationships with people.
Yeah, relationships. I like that. Okay, so why would you say it's important to build your network? What are some of the benefits? And some of them might be obvious, but just maybe even in your personal experience or just what you've seen, why do you think it's important?
Well, one of the neat things about building your network, particularly in a time where we're projected to change jobs, I think 12 times in our careers, building your network in a lot of ways doesn't just help you know different people in different places. It allows you to build different competencies and different interests that you didn't know you had. Mm-hmm. And so networking doesn't just broaden your career horizons. It can also broaden your community horizons, and it allows you different opportunities to get involved in your community in meaningful ways.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess from that, from your personal experience, how did you decide what to get involved with? I mean, we heard that you are very active in the community, but how did you decide on the best ways to build your network, and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, early on, you mentioned I was in real estate for a little while, and we went through this training process really around building clients and building relationships. And one of the things that they talked about was the idea that you can never really have more than 200 people in your network meaningfully. And 200, most people never get to. Most people, it's 35 or 40 people who are meaningfully in their network. And the best way to cultivate that, and I found this to be true in my own life, is by getting to know the people around you already, following your interests. So it's not necessarily about signing up for every networking opportunity or going to every event, but it's about getting deep into things that are important to you and causes that you care about. So in my own experience, for a long time, that was real estate, which segued into urban design and development and planning. And then I'm kind of a serial hobbyist. And so sometimes it takes me into different areas and different avenues. But that real estate background actually helped me out in the Citrix role as well as we began to build our downtown office. So I got to get more plugged in those kinds of ways. And in the nonprofit side of things, it's easy to give your time and volunteer your energy when you're committed personally to a cause. And so I think that's really important too. People are very aware when you're being authentic and being genuine about networking and relationship building. And when you care a lot about a cause or you're interested in a topic, I think that really comes through.
I think one question that I get a lot kind of stems from that. So some people think that they have to be involved with an organization that's really just about their profession, right? Or their industry. So what would you say, because some of them you said were just interests, and some may coincide with what you're doing professionally and some may not. So is it still worth it to get involved with something that maybe, like if you love animals, it's still worth it to get involved with that even though you're in financial planning?
Absolutely. I think one of the best things about being involved in, particularly in nonprofits and in civic engagements, is it often levels the playing field. Like, and I mean that in such a way that if you're in a professional networking environment, typically you've got a CEO level, you've got senior level leadership, and then you've got often a young professionals group and things like that. And those groups don't always interact. And when you get into the nonprofit space or the civic space, you tend to see really a lot of those walls drop. And that actually allows you as a young professional to get to know people who are in leadership positions and who may be in leadership positions in fields and industries that you hadn't yet considered.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you make networking, because you even mentioned it, sometimes we feel like we're kind of using someone. So how do you make that transition from making it feel like, oh, I'm just going to the event because I'm going to need this person's help? So how do you navigate that?
I think a really important piece of that is deciding that you do want to invest your energy meaningfully in people. You have to be interested in what other people have going on. And that's when it stops becoming a using sort of relationship, when you really have built a friendship, when you know their family's names, their kids' names, where they've been on vacation, when you really can talk about those other things at events that aren't just, oh, hey, nice to meet you. Here's my card. Call me sometime kind of thing. And so years ago, I was young. My dad actually recommended a book to me, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh, yeah.
And if you've never read it, completely recommend it. It's a short, easy read. It's a little bit dated in its writing, admittedly, but a lot of the principles I think really hold true. And many of those ring through around the idea of people want to tell you about themselves. People want to talk about what's going on in their lives, and that's a really good foundation for building trust and building relationships.
Yeah. So I guess in some of those ways, do you have kind of some go-to questions that makes it to where you start to build those relationships? That might seem very elementary, but for some people, if they don't necessarily know the best way to kind of approach somebody, again, without having that using feeling in the back of their mind.
And I think part of that's dependent on context. You know, if you find yourself at a conference or a networking event, you might start with, you know, simple work-based questions and things like that, or how long have you been in your role, or how did you get into your role? That's actually one of my favorite questions in any context is, how did you get to the job that you've got? It gives people a chance to tell their story and not to tell all of it if they don't want to. It's not too personal. It allows them to share what they're interested in sharing, but it allows you to discover that most of us have had really winding career paths. Not many people went directly from A to B to C. And so people can tell you something important about themselves in that. Sometimes if it's a more social engagement, you know, simple questions around how are you connected to the host, for example, or if it's a nonprofit, how long have you been involved in? Why are you involved in? Those kinds of things. Really those open-ended questions that allow people to tell you about themselves.
Yes. And everyone has their story. So if you are naturally just interested in learning more, that could be a really good way of going about it. So, and we are taking some questions coming in, so feel free to send those whenever you get a chance. So who are kind of, what are the best kinds of network? I guess, you know, if there's a certain area or people that you should focus your energy on, because we only have so much time in the day, and I know you're very active. So how do you pick which ones are going to be the most important and where you dedicate the majority of your time?
Yeah, I think that I kind of look at it from almost a matrix sort of standpoint, in that there are certain things that are career important, and there are certain things that are personal and life important. And particularly as there are more and more demands and challenges on our time, we've really got to find a way to balance those things. And some things are going to check a number of boxes. You're going to get to go to a conference that is professionally or fulfilling, and you're going to learn a lot, but you're also going to get to maybe visit some family or something in the area, wherever it is. And some things are going to check just one box. And I think a lot of that is about what's important to you right then. And I think for young professionals in particular, it's important to put the energy in early into your career, because the later that it gets, the longer you wait, the harder it is. There's more demands on your time. And having that base, that background, the foundation of a good, solid network is incredibly helpful.
Starting early.
Yes. Early and often.
That is very good advice. So how would you say networking can help identify future career options? And maybe that's, again, from personal experience or just something that you have seen kind of happen.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's neat about networking is it really can open the doors to careers you might not have even considered or knew existed. A personal story around that a little bit in the tech industry, in many industries, there's a field called product management, product development. And it kind of talks about how you're going to really get into the direction, the strategy of a product line. It's not something they teach you about in college, at least not when I was there. And so there are these kinds of things, and there are so many jobs that we are going to have in the next 10 to 15 to 20, 30, 40 years that we can't imagine right now. And what's nice about networking is it doesn't just introduce you to other career titles and career paths. It also can help you stay on top of industry trends.
Yeah.
And not even specific to your industry, but knowing sort of what's coming and what's going, which can help position you really well for future career moves.
Yeah, definitely. So we do have a question that came through. It is, what are some good networking tools it's a little bit small, trying to read through it. What are some good networking tools to connect with your networks? Okay, so maybe like LinkedIn or something like that, and we can elaborate as we go through. Let's see if there's anything. Recommend reaching out to stay in touch. Okay, yeah, great question. So I'm just going to reread it since I was struggling a little bit there. So what are some good networking tools to maintain contact with your networks? Would you recommend using, let's see, to stay in touch with them during the holiday season and when you're thinking about them? So yeah, and we had talked about that earlier, actually, when somebody kind of pops into your mind. What is the best way to maintain your networks? That's a great question. Sorry for my struggles with that, but Ashton will give us some good insight.
Oh, I think it definitely depends on the context of the relationship, of course, but it's hard to say, but always a handwritten note, a phone call, a text message. And again, some of that depends on the level of relationship you have with someone. But I used to work for a company that would send a birthday card every year. They send holiday cards to top customers and clients, and they are always inviting people over to different events that they're hosting and kind of reminding you to stay top of mind. And there are systems out there, particularly if you're building client networks, that can help remind you it's been 30 days. I should reach out and make contact with this person. Some things that are a little bit more personal, LinkedIn can be really successful for people if that's your authentic voice. I think that's important. Some people are really more Facebook active and they've got a whole Facebook page around the work that they do. And some people find other social media to be it. Other people, it's just a simple email. You know, just a little note that says, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. I was just thinking about you. I wonder how your vacation was.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. And those are really meaningful to people. You've probably gotten notes like that before where you think, oh, what a sweet thought. Thanks so much for thinking of me. Hope you're doing well, that kind of thing. And I think sometimes that can lead to additional meetings in the future and just continued contact. But it really, in my experience, doesn't have to be a grand gesture.
Yeah.
It can be something really small and minor. And sometimes it's a travel safe before a vacation, or it's a remembering that your favorite pizza is pepperoni with mushrooms, and you know, those kinds of things. You know, it's just remembering those little details about people. And one tool that I'm going to give this away as a secret, so you guys,
this is good.
that I've found to be really successful, is the notes section of your contacts in your phone. It can be really challenging to remember someone's spouse's name, their kids' names, their pets' names, where they've been, that kind of thing. But when you can store that information, and I promise you can't always discreetly find your phone and pull it out, but a lot of times you can review things before you know you're going to see someone, or the moment you exchange cards, make a note on the back of it, how you met them, why you met them, what you were talking about, and how you can follow up. And sometimes people will be really honest with you about the best way to follow up. Like for me, it's actually not a LinkedIn message. It's send me an email, that kind of thing. So people often, if you ask them, how should I follow up with you, are really happy to be concrete about that.
What a great tip. I will definitely be using that from now on.
It's a secret. If you see me looking at my phone, don't be mad.
That is fabulous. That is fabulous. So I kind of guess touching on LinkedIn, because that is a really great way to do more online networking. So how do you recommend that people use it, or how have you used it yourself that you found to be really helpful?
One of the neat things I think about LinkedIn is it really allows you to see the spread of a network. And particularly as you start job searching or you're looking for additional advice into a career path, because I do think there's shades of a job search. There's the kind of initial, I'm thinking about something, or I want to learn about that industry. And that can be an important step, particularly if you're thinking about going back to school or something like that. finding someone who's in that field already,
Absolutely.
who may only be 1 or 2 degrees away from you. And LinkedIn can be really helpful about that. But a word of caution around that, I think it is important for people to be restricted a little bit in their networks. There's plenty of people who do client soliciting through LinkedIn,
Yes.
and who will add people they don't know and send little messages. So I think as the receiver, it's important to be mindful that when someone sees you're connected, they're going to expect that there's a relationship of some kind there. But also as the sender, to send a little note that reminds somebody where you met or how you met or whatever it was, change that little bit to something personal.
Yeah.
The so-and-so would like to connect.
Yeah.
Change that to something meaningful so
Right.
that they recognize who you are. And it takes 15 seconds to just add a tiny bit of character, even if it just says, hey, great to meet you at the conference, kind of thing.
Personalizing it.
Absolutely.
So, what about if somebody maybe like finds you on LinkedIn, they see you work at Citrix and they really want to get a job there and they reach out to you? What is ideal in that scenario? What do you want to see from that person who's reaching out to you in the personalized message, I guess?
Yeah, sure. Typically in that scenario, I want to know a little bit about the person, if we are connected, how we're connected, maybe just a sentence or two about the relationship they have with the secondary connection. But I also want to know a little bit about who they are, what they're looking for, and their background. And often you can see that, and it may be different with recruiters in particular, the kind of contact that they have. But in my experience, telling people a little bit of, telling me a little bit about themselves is a really good piece of that. And getting kind of to the purpose of a message too. And I mean that in such a way that many people start out with, hey, would love to talk to you sometime. Okay.
Kind of broad.
Fantastic. Right. And so I think in my experience, reaching out to other people, it's much more helpful if you are specific about your ask. Saying, I would like to talk to you. I would love to get coffee or lunch or chat on the phone, which I think not enough people take advantage of anymore.
Noted.
And what is it that you're hoping to get out of the conversation? Often we use the phrase, I want to pick your brain about something. And okay, but a little more detail, because I may not even be the best person for you to talk to. And if I'm not, I might be able to connect you with someone who's going to be better at what you're trying to solve. So being specific can help.
Yeah. So even if that means that they don't necessarily know exactly what they want to talk to you about, but just whether that's the company specifically that they want to learn more about, or your role specifically, but something, so it doesn't have to be like, I want to be in this field. Can you help? Or can you kind of elaborate just a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I think, imagine you get a message from someone that's like, oh, I would love to go to coffee and chat a little bit. Well, your day is full and it's busy. And what's a little bit? Whose version of a little bit are we working with here? And those kinds of things. And so when someone can say, I want to learn about how you got into your industry. Great. Or I want to learn more about the different roles available at your company. Or I want to learn about why your specific title is so unusual. Those kinds of things. And some of that you'll find can actually be solved over email. And maybe you do get a coffee to get to know each other a little bit better or something like that. But in that scenario, managing people's expectations, it also means that the person you're meeting with comes to the meeting, the coffee, the lunch, more prepared. We have an opportunity to think about what you're going to talk about and what's important to the person you're meeting with. Then everybody gets a more fulfilling experience.
And I guess kind of piggybacking off of that, because obviously you've seen people become very generic in their asking. So what are other maybe common mistakes that you see just when people reach out to you, or when you're attending events and you see interactions? What are some of those mistakes? Because sometimes knowing it, then maybe we can avoid it, right?
Sure. Well, I definitely think, particularly at networking kinds of settings, basically approaching someone with a business card in hand is really not a good way to go about meeting people anymore. And it may be different in certain environments, but in my experience, really start with like getting to know someone and don't lead with the sales pitch, because people tune that out pretty quickly. We get advertisements most of our lives. We spend all our time being sold to in some capacity. And so people they really don't warm well to that. So that's a big one that I see a lot of. Another one might be people not really knowing what they want out of something. And sometimes you're not going to. Sometimes you're just making friends with someone, and that's okay. But sometimes when you do need something specific, or you're hoping for advice or an idea around something, people don't articulate it as well as they could. And that can be a problem.
So I know this just from talking to you, but so you were in Italy, right? Up in Italian island, which is, again, so cool. So how did you come back and start to, because you used your network.
Absolutely.
Can you just talk a little bit about how you use your network and best practices for that, I guess?
Sure. And full disclosure, I spent years building this network, but I didn't have any sense of how valuable it was until I came back.
Yeah.
It was just a part of doing business and being involved in my community and really caring about what was going on. And when I actually it decided that I wouldn't leave until I knew I could come back, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
until I knew that there would be space for me still in the Raleigh area when I was ready to come back to do whatever it was. So coming back to Italy, from Italy, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do. I knew I didn't want to be in sales.
It's important to know.
Exactly. I knew what I couldn't do. I'm not going to be an astronaut anytime soon or a heart surgeon or any of those things. So I kind of whittled that down. And then I started to reach out to my network with very specific, very personal emails. So not blind copy everybody on an ask of some kind, but really personal emails. Hey, Anna, how have you been? How's the family? This kind of thing. I'm moving back to Raleigh. Can't wait to see you. What's new? And then a list of things that I considered strengths and the kinds of company that I wanted to work for.
Okay.
And I essentially asked each of those people to let me know if they had contacts or any ideas of people who wanted to hire someone like me.
Okay.
So being able to utilize that network and their networks became incredibly powerful.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I guess when you were reaching out, did you have that feeling of, what can this person do for me? Or was it more like, what was your mindset as you were reaching out to these networks that you've built?
So many of the people that I reached out to, I had gotten to know over the years doing service-based work and volunteering and through professional relationships as well. So there was already a trust built up. And so it didn't feel like I was making an inappropriate ask or I was reaching too far. It felt like if they asked it of me, I would do the same thing. It felt like that kind of mutual balanced relationship.
That is so important. I think, and that's where some people that think, oh, I'm just trying to use this person, or they get that feeling, they don't realize that they can maybe be an asset as well.
Absolutely.
Right? So what are some of let's see, when you are maintaining your network, I think the notes was an amazing suggestion. I will definitely be taking that with me. Is there anything else that you suggest, just like if you met somebody and you think, oh, they could be a good contact or a good person to reach out to, what are your practices for just kind of keeping them in the back of your mind? Or do you have a Rolodex? I don't know.
It's weird. I do think in 2017 that we still share so many business cards.
Yeah.
I think it's a very odd phenomenon.
Yeah.
Typically, if we go to a meeting where everyone's been on the same calendar and I have your contact information. But one of the things that's nice about a business card, though, is it can remind you after the fact to follow up with someone or to make that connection on LinkedIn. So that can be something, particularly if it's been an evening event and you maybe don't get back in front of your computer till the next day. That can be really helpful. And sometimes it's just a quick note that says, really enjoyed meeting you, would love to work together on a project, or there's something coming up or I can be helpful.
Yeah.
Please let me know, those kinds of things.
How important is follow-up?
Incredibly.
Yeah.
I think we see that in all aspects of our life. I mean, if someone says, oh, it's great to meet you, I'm going to reach out, we'll do this thing together, and you never hear from them, you kind of remember that for a long time.
Absolutely.
So it's not even just about the continuity of a relationship. It's about establishing who you are as a person.
Yeah.
If you said you would do something and then you didn't, I'm going to remember that.
Yeah.
And obviously things come up and life happens and all of that, but it does start to build the narrative of who you are and how committed you are to your network and your relationships and the people that you bring into your life.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you navigate networking between groups who have different political views?
Carefully.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, I think a lot of that and so much of politics today can be ignored when we get to the idea that we want a lot of the same things. And that's cause specific or industry specific, but at our cores, many people want health, they want happiness, they want safe cities, they want safe spaces to live, they want a productive job. People want the same things.
Yeah.
Politics tends to happen as we disagree about where government's role in that is and so that can be either a productive, meaningful conversation with someone, or it can be a topic that you simply avoid.
Right.
And that happens a lot in business groups where you don't come into it with a political background, but truthfully, I think one of the best things about those kinds of groups is when politics do finally come up, you've built a relationship with someone.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you like that person as a
Yeah.
human.
Mutual respect.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And so it's easier to have the difficult conversations that politics can sometimes bring up.
Yeah, and I think there are other ways to connect with people too,
Yeah.
right? Like there, maybe you don't have the same views in certain respects, but there's a lot of other things that you can
Yeah.
find that you have in common.
And
For
so
sure.
one of my favorite things around that has always been I try to stay tuned in around sports a little bit because
Yep.
that can be an easy conversation starter for a lot of people.
Yeah, like that.
And then also what's happening in the city,
Mhm.
what's happening locally, what's building has been announced, what project is going on, what's happening, because those things are easier to talk about without getting highly politicized
Yeah,
than what's happening at a national or even sometimes a state level.
yeah. I will add to that food.
Yep.
We
Good
all
one.
eat.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that could be
Holidays, particularly this time of
yes.
year.
Since you brought up holidays,
Sure.
how is this time of year specifically really good for what we've been talking about as far as building, maintaining? How
Yeah.
does just talk about the holiday season in regards to networking?
Well, I think what makes this season so fun in a lot of ways is that people are generally upbeat, they're generally positive, they're coming into events with a lot of energy, and you get a chance. There's so many events, you get a chance to reconnect with a lot of different
Yes.
people. And what's interesting, I think, is that the expectation when there's so many events, if I'm hosting an event, I know
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're going to be there for 2 hours. You might come by for 15 or 20 minutes. And then from your standpoint, as the person trying to do more networking, it's
Yeah.
a little bit easier to get to a couple of different things,
Absolutely.
see more people, touch base. But you also have really easy conversations with people.
Yeah.
Are you traveling for the holidays? Do you have any plans for the holidays? What did you do for Thanksgiving? What will
Yeah.
you do? Those kinds of things. And again, going back to allowing people to tell their story, particularly if
Mhm.
they're traveling or sometimes not traveling,
Yeah.
they'll tell you why or where they're going. And then that can lead to easier conversations about different places you visited or they visited and all kinds of
Yeah.
even sometimes meaningful family traditions.
Yep. We had a good question come in. Thank you, Denise. What would you suggest if you do not have a good connection or contact when asking for something? So we had talked before, if you're reaching out on LinkedIn, maybe your second connection.
Yeah.
But what about when you maybe identify a contact just by searching on LinkedIn or just seeing, I don't know, something in the local news? So you have a name, but you don't necessarily have that direct contact. What would
Sure.
you suggest in that situation?
Well, again, I think it's really just about being direct with people. And obviously, it's going to depend on who you're reaching out to. Some people are going to be really cold and kind of ignore that. And some people are going to be really open and welcoming and friendly. And most people, I think, are going to fall in the middle, that you're going to have to kind of go back and forth a little bit about
Yeah.
sort of what you're looking for out of it. And again, you may find that that person isn't the best person to talk with. And sometimes when you're reaching out to someone in a senior leadership position or a local official of some kind, there's an important piece about being respectful of their time. I think
Yeah.
that we sometimes forget about. Going back to that sales training I went to years ago, they used to talk about the value of your time,
Yeah.
and that's not something that we often quantify. But if you are in a commission-based role, you really can break that down.
Yeah.
And so thinking about how even a half an hour of a CEO's time, it's a huge investment of that person's energy and time. And so I think being mindful of that when you're making an ask is important. But always, if there's an opportunity to find a connection, I think a warm introduction is always a little bit better than a cold one.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So I think we're about to wrap up, but I had one question that I think I've been thinking through as you've been talking is it too late? Because one thing that you did that I think was great is you start early, you start building this network before you meet anybody. And I think that's key. But what about for someone who maybe is new to the area and might need something down the road? Or, I mean, when is it too late? Or how do you really start building that network from scratch, even if you do need something sooner than later? Because obviously
Yeah.
it's great if we need something
Sure.
down the road and then we can pull from those people. But if we maybe don't know that, we might need their help. You know, how do
Yeah.
you start?
Hit the pavement, get out there, get to events. And it's hard. It takes time and energy and involvement. And for me, I think the best opportunity, and I'll tell this to anybody, is through volunteering.
Yeah.
Really, that is the way to meaningfully make connections and build authentic relationships. But if you need a job, you're new to an area, that's important too. And I understand that. And so, getting out to those events and introducing yourself and trying not to lead with I need a job, trying to lead with getting to know someone and building that up
Yeah.
really can make the difference. And so it's just about being out there. It's maximizing your time and meeting as many people as possible, because you do need something in the short term.
Yeah.
But then maintaining those relationships moving forward.
Right.
Because no one likes that feeling like, oh, we only got to know each other because she needed that one thing from me and now I never hear from them.
And maintaining it in the way that, like you said, you can ask them what's the best way to follow up or what's the best way to keep in touch, and you start to learn that, right? Whether it's email, LinkedIn.
Yeah, or are there other groups that you would recommend or meetings that I should be at or groups I should participate in, those kinds of things that even open the door for an invitation where now you know somebody at a networking event.
Absolutely. All right, well, any last kind of advice or tips or anything to leave us with?
No, good luck out there. We talked a little bit about introversion and extroversion, and
that's true,
that's something that I think people often think being good at networking means you have to be extroverted, and that's just really, in my experience, not the case. But you have to be willing to put the energy into it and then build in the time as an introvert to recover from that a little bit.
That is fabulous advice. Well, thank you so much, Ashton. We have loved having you here.
Thank you.
And if y'all have questions, you can send me an email, and go Pack. Howl back.